A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks again for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you with us today. On the program, Stephen Gutowski of the Washington Free Beacon going to join us talking about the record numbers of NICS checks performed in April, the highest number of NICS checks performed in the month of April in the 20-plus year history of the National Instant Check System. Stephen has also written a great piece about some of the gun store owners around the country that have kept their shops open even when they have been ordered to close. And this is something to keep in mind when you take a look at these NICS numbers, that, this is not normal. We have gun stores keep in mind, these are the numbers for April, right? So in the month of April, you had gun stores that were ordered closed in New York, Massachusetts, New Mexico, Washington State, Bay Area of California, Los Angeles City, Los Angeles County. Remember, back and forth, and then they said, okay, fine, you can stay open. I believe Maine gun stores were closed throughout most of the month of April. So, you've got really strong numbers, considering the fact that A, not every gun store in the country was open, and B, the supply of firearms you would have thought might have been impacted by the record number of sales in March of this year. Also, we talked with Stephen about a new poll out of the Washington Post, taking a look at the shutdowns and how eager Americans are to reopen portions of the economy. The answer, according to this Washington Post poll, is not eager at all. Some 82% of respondents say keep movie theaters closed. 78%, I believe, say keep gyms closed. 70% say keep gun stores closed. 69% nail salons. 59% golf courses. Keep golf courses closed. I know. Here's the thing. This is a poll of, and I've gotten a lot of folks telling me on Twitter, listen, this was all liberals. This was just polled in Maryland. No, it was a nationwide poll. We don't know what the political breakdown was. But even if you just take a look at just Republicans, yes, they are more likely to say it's time to reopen up the economy, but it's not 80% of Republicans. There are a lot of Americans. I think it is fair to say a majority of Americans right now are terrified about what happens when we start to reopen up the economy. I don't believe it's healthy to live in terror. I don't believe it is healthy to live in fear. I think that we do have to figure out a way to do this cautiously, safely, responsibly, but you can't keep things locked down forever. And frankly, when it comes to this poll, most gun stores around the country have not been ordered closed at all. Most gun stores have remained open. There's also the ATF guidance to gun stores that, listen, you can conduct your business outside. As long as you're on your property, you can set up shop in the parking lot and you can do stuff there. I don't think a lot of Americans are aware of that. B, I'm not sure how closely Americans are listening to stuff like this. I think we as a society may be so wrapped up right now in our fear that we're putting it around us like a blanket, and we're trying to just, cover ourselves in this fear. I got to tell you, that is no way to live. And I say this as somebody, again, who has a immunocompromised individual at home who I love dearly, who I'm trying to protect each and every day. I'm not going to run out and start licking doorknobs. But if there is a way to, again, safely and responsibly go grocery shop, and that's one of the other weird things about this poll. 56% of Americans in this poll said they feel comfortable grocery shopping, but 69% say they would feel uncomfortable going to like a retail clothing store. Why? What's the difference? Other than you're probably going to spend, I'm just going on my personal experience, you're probably going to have some more time in the grocery store than you would in a clothing store. I don't know how you shop, but I tend not to browse in clothing stores. If I need a pair of jeans, I go in, I pick up a pair of jeans, and I'm out in like 10 minutes. I'd actually probably feel less freaked out about going clothes shopping than I would going grocery shopping, because it'd probably be around less people. I'd be in the store for a smaller amount of time, and I wouldn't be as concerned about contracting the coronavirus based on those two things. But again, we're not thinking logically right now. We are reacting very emotionally. And that might be human nature too, but it's also human nature to move past this type of fear. So we, again, spent some time talking with our friend Stephen Gutowski of the Washington Free Beacon about Americans' attitudes towards the shutdown, Americans' attitudes towards the right to keep and bear arms, and those gun store owners who have said no to the shutdown orders that have been in place locally. Take a look and a listen. Stephen, it is good to see you in quarantine, sir. Thanks for coming on the program today.
Yeah, it's good to connect with another human person.
It is good to connect with another human being. And there are Americans who are doing this. We saw the NICS numbers for April come out yesterday, and still a lot of us actually going to the gun store around the country, apparently, even with gun stores closed in Massachusetts, New York, Washington State, Bay Area, and LA, and California, and some other states. New Mexico was closed for all of April as well in terms of gun stores. Still, according to the National Shooting Sports Foundation, what a 69% increase over the April 2019 numbers, which I got to tell you, man, that's pretty surprising. I honestly wondered how much inventory there would be left for retailers and distributors to actually, put on the shelves in April.
Yeah, it was the best April in the history of NICS, according to one of the analysis out of SAAF. And I believe NSSF's analysis found the same thing too. So it's a pretty impressive number given all the things that you just laid out there. I mean, clearly it was much harder to buy a gun in April than probably any month in history.
Right.
Because even in states where gun stores were open, they uniformly adopted social distancing policies, which meant you couldn't just have a crowd of people in the store at once for safety reasons, for obvious safety reasons in the middle of this pandemic. But so it was much more difficult. Plus, the stock was not at the levels it normally is, for sure. And I think that's probably the demand in April is probably an artifact of that as well, because in March, a lot of stores sold out of everything. And so people who had gone in March probably went back in April to get what they couldn't get then. And even though the industry is still, I think, struggling a bit with supply, like a lot of industries are right now, there was still enough to set this new record. Now, the numbers are down from March significantly, but they are still, I mean, as you and probably most of your viewers know, the gun sales in the United States are seasonal. They tend to fluctuate in a seasonal pattern. And so we're actually headed into the low period for gun sales. The summer is usually the lowest sales period in the U.S. And so April is always lower than March. But that's why it's important to compare month to, an April to an April. And so the fact that last April or this previous month here was the best April on record says a lot.
Absolutely. And, when you get a piece of the Washington Free Beacon about a Florida gun store owner, a firefighter who refused to close his gun store, I've written and talked with some folks who've kept their stores open as well. And it's interesting to me that, again, you talk about the challenges that gun owners are facing or prospective gun owners are facing. These gun store owners are facing challenges as well, even in places where you wouldn't necessarily think that they would be. I mean, Florida is, I think, a very pro-Second Amendment friendly state, but as you write, Delray Beach, Florida, they had code enforcement officers walk into Wex Gun Works and told Brandon Wexler that he had to shut down. And he basically said no, right? I mean, he had 500 people, you write, waiting on their purchases when he was told to close his doors.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Florida has a 5-day waiting period for anyone who doesn't have a concealed carry license. And so he had a huge influx of new customers coming, first-time customers, to buy guns in the middle of March. And he was concerned when code enforcement came in to tell him he had to shut down. He was concerned about those people specifically. He said that he wasn't as worried about his business necessarily. I mean, a lot of the gun stores, they don't really make their money off of gun sales to begin with. Gun sales are a fairly low margin part of the business. And so they mostly make money off of training and range rentals, things like that, depending on the operation. But he wasn't really concerned about the money aspect. He was much more concerned about whether or not these people would be able to get their firearms that they'd passed a background check and paid for, because, he felt like not only is it violating their rights to deny them that ability to pick up their guns, but also, it could potentially put them in danger because, that people were buying guns out of a concern for their self-defense, for their defense of their home and their families. And he knew that, and that was his top concern. So he immediately reached out to the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is the industry's trade group. They represent, retailers and manufacturers. And he worked with them to try and figure out a way to sue the city if possible, if necessary. And so they contacted city officials, the city attorney, and eventually got them to back down. And so he was able to, stay open for those customers. Now, again, this is another scenario where it's not as though he's just operating as normal, right? I mean, I think that's something to consider with a lot of these gun store disputes. It's not that they have an issue, from what I've seen, the people that I've spoken with, owners. It's not that they have an issue with social distancing requirements. In fact, they've been implementing them themselves before they were required to. In most of these stores that I've spoke with, they just believe that people have a constitutional right to buy firearms for their own self-protection, especially in a time of emergency like this, when you're seeing a lot of rise in crime and prisoners being released, and concerns like that. Potential meat shortages we're in the middle of right now. Things. People are concerned for good reason. I think Americans have handled this situation as best as can be expected to this point, but people want to be prepared in case, they need to protect themselves. And so I think that's from what these owners told me. And I spoke to 3 different ones who had dealt with shutdowns, and that's their main concern, is that people are able to protect themselves.
Yeah. Well, and as you say, I'd say we're maybe at like 80% of handling this as well as we could. I don't know we're 100% yet, but I think we're doing a pretty good job around the country as a society.
We're not rioting in the streets or a huge spike in crime or anything, which I think is a credit to the American spirit dealing with adversity like this. It doesn't mean it's impossible. Certainly, we've had riots in the United States. We've had situations where police can't make it to protect you, and when we're dealing with a virus that makes it makes their job even harder, and it makes it even more unrealistic to try and wholly rely on them for your security. And so, I think a lot of that's what's driving a lot of them. I wrote. We talked about this last time. I wrote a piece about first-time buyers and what was driving them to actually go and make a gun purchase when they hadn't ever done it before, and it was this exact reason. I mean, it was this concern about where things could go if they got worse. Now, hopefully, they don't, right? And they haven't gotten to that point so far, thankfully. But this is why people are buying guns. It's not for it's shooting competitions at the moment, or
right. No, it's
hunting more, I guess. But
I'll be curious to see actually if we see an increase in hunting licenses around the country. But you're right. I mean, it's the fear of the unknown that is driving this, and there's also that fear of the unknown among people who aren't buying guns. I know you saw this Washington Post poll that came out today, asking folks, would you feel comfortable going to a restaurant? Do you think movie theaters should remain closed? Restaurants and something like 70% of those polled said, oh yeah, gun stores should stay closed for now. 59% said golf courses should remain closed for now. I mean, this is you look at there's not been any outbreak that I'm aware of that's been traced back to a gun store or a golf course for that matter. ATF has actually said to gun stores, listen, you can conduct business outside. On your property, if you are able to do that, feel free, move everything outside, do your business out there. But I don't think Americans, A, are aware of the intricacies of how we buy and sell firearms. And B, I think that many Americans they're just afraid right now. They're not listening necessarily to all of the information that's coming in. They're just gripped with this idea of, we don't know what's happening next. We don't know what's coming. And it's not unreasonable to be concerned, right. But I would say it's not very healthy to live your life in fear, right? And so I think those Americans who are purchasing firearms because of the fear of the unknown, I don't think that many of them are actually living their lives in fear. I think that they're addressing their fear and saying, okay, I want to be able to handle a situation if things go bad. I think, in that sense, I think that perspective is a little bit different than those folks who are saying, you know what, I'm never going to eat at a restaurant again. It's not safe for you to go to a golf course. It's not safe for you to go outside at all without a mask. I think that there's a balance that has to be struck. And I don't know that – I think we're working our way towards that, but I don't think we've reached it yet.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with a novel virus, right? So it's something that didn't exist a year ago, right? And so we don't have a full grasp on what is completely safe and what isn't. And so I can totally understand people who are concerned about, going to restaurants even and movie theaters and so forth because of the obvious concern about being in close quarters with strangers, who, especially given that the virus can spread asymptomatically or pre-symptomatically, it's hard to know who's sick and who's not. It's sort of a living nightmare, right? If you're out in the streets, I understand that concern, and then at the same time, we have to keep up with developments of what is safe to do, what is not safe to do, when is the appropriate time to, lift restrictions. We are thankfully nationwide in a downward slope now for infections and deaths. It's not the same everywhere, of course. Some places are still on the upward, and we need to be careful about how we go about reopening things so we don't have a second wave and so forth, all the concerns that everybody's, wrapped up in on a daily basis and for good reason. The gun store is like any other store in that, it's still uncomfortable to go places in the middle of a pandemic. The stores that I've been to are doing their best to, keep things safe and clean and socially distanced. But it's just on a human level. It can be uncomfortable to go anywhere at this point. And so I think that's why you see those numbers. It's not necessarily a logical thing of, is going to the park or the beach, if I stay 6 feet away from people, is that fine? Yes, it should be, from what experts say. Or is it okay to gather in small groups if you're, again, social distance, like a gun store? If you stay away from people, is it safe? It should be, from what experts say. But I can understand why people have a sort of visceral reaction to it, and just want to hope that this thing ends as soon as possible, like we all hope. But but I totally understand what you're saying there, because you have to try to force yourself to think logically about all of the risks involved with this, and not going outside is not, it's not a 100% risk of catching the virus. You have to be try to make yourself think through everything, even though concerns are obviously valid.
Absolutely. And hopefully, like I said, we're working our way to that point. Hey, listen,
development has moved faster than I think we expected. And we have some antiviral medication that has shown effectiveness. So we are in a better space now than we were in March, for sure. So hopefully we can continue with that progress, and our medical professionals who are heroes can help us work towards an end to this, because it's a horrible nightmare situation that we're living through for sure.
Yeah, we're living in a Michael Crichton novel. Hopefully, could be worse, could be Stephen King, but could be better as well. Now, listen, before we run out of time, I want to ask you about something. We were talking off air about this, and a great friend of the Second Amendment and a great man passed away, killed in the line of duty in Overland Park, Kansas, a couple of days ago. And I know that he was a family friend of yours. What can you tell us about what happened there in Overland Park and what we can do to help the family that is grieving?
Yeah, Officer Mike Mosher passed away, unfortunately, on Sunday, killed in the line of duty, as you said, doing his job, trying to protect the community. He was trying to arrest the suspect in a hit-and-run accident when he was killed in a shootout. And it's a horrific situation. Mike, by all accounts, was a heroic officer. He was named Officer of the Year by the Kansas Chiefs of Police in 2019, and he won the Gold Valor Award for his role in stopping an active shooter in 2018. He was a 14-year veteran of the force. He's the head of his Fraternal Order of Police chapter, and I mean he was a stand-up man from all accounts. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us, and he leaves behind an incredible family, a wife, Corinne Mosher, who many of your viewers probably know because she was very much involved with the DC Project, which is a Second Amendment advocacy organization that brings women from all over the country to the Capitol to advocate for the Second Amendment every year. And she also did a lot of work in her home state of Kansas. And so your viewers are probably familiar with her and her work. She's a competitive shooter and instructor. Mike was also a firearms instructor in Kansas, and then they also have a wonderful daughter. And so I think Corinne and their daughter are going to need a lot of support from the community right now. There's nothing we can do to replace what they've lost, but there are certainly things we can do to try and make things a little bit easier for them. And so there is a GoFundMe account that has been started as a memorial fund for Officer Mosher, and I've donated to it. I just donated $150 right before we came on here today, and I would ask that other people please donate whatever you possibly can to help the Mosher family, because they're going to need a lot of support from the community, especially I think we have a strong Second Amendment community here, and they're going to need a lot of help from us in the coming weeks and years. So if people could please give whatever you can, pray for the family first, please offer them your support as best you can, and then please donate whatever you possibly can. I know it's a difficult time, but obviously what they're going through is much more difficult than most of the rest of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to put the link in the story here at bearingarms.com, and also in the below the video window on YouTube, so folks can find that. And again, make that donation if they can. Keep the Mosher family in your thoughts and your prayers in the meantime. And Stephen, as always, sir, it is good talking with you. I appreciate you coming on the program. Appreciate all that you do. And I hope we get a chance to catch up in person here before long.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Gutowski joins from the Washington Free Beacon here on Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. I do appreciate Stephen coming on the program. I appreciate him also sharing details about how we can help out the Mosher family as they continue to deal with just an unfathomable loss. And I know that our thoughts and our hearts and prayers go out to the Mosher family. Let's turn our attention now to our good deed of the day, our armed citizen story, our recidivist report. We will begin there from Cache County, Utah, where a man is facing felony charges after allegedly damaging a home and trying to bite deputies. As it turns out, this is not the first run-in with the law for the suspect there in Utah. Roger Dean Campbell, 42 years of age, Faces 2 counts of third-degree assault by a prisoner, as well as 5 different misdemeanors. According to a affidavit filed by police, Cache County deputies responded to a domestic dispute at a home where Campbell had been living since his release from the Utah State Prison earlier this month, or actually back in April, I guess. Deputies wrote that Campbell had become drunk while taking too much antipsychotic medication. Yeah, in a belligerent, defiant state, Campbell threw a wooden sculpture through a window of the home. The owners became fearful and fled the home. Campbell was found asleep in the home with estimated 30 empty beer cans on his bedside table. Campbell, initially compliant, placed in handcuffs, but became increasingly agitated, began yelling obscenities at deputies, defying orders, trying to escape the grasp of deputies holding him. According to the deputies, when they tried to place him in a patrol truck, he attempted to bite 2 of the deputies and headbutt them as well. Ultimately, he was restrained in an ambulance, transported to a local hospital. Campbell is currently on parole. So back in 2016, he was sentenced to 120 days in jail and 36 months probation for aggravated robbery, theft, and driving under the influence. All 3 charges, third-degree felonies. In 2018, he was apparently already back out on the streets. And sentenced to 0 to 5 years in the Utah State Prison for violation of a protective order and criminal mischief, also both third-degree felonies. 0 to 5 years. That was back in 2018. Got out in April of 2020. So did less than half of the 0 to 5 year sentence. And again, despite how many felonies is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 felonies in 4 years, and not a lot of time behind bars to show for it. Now, again, facing some additional felony charges, but I'm guessing that Roger Dean Campbell will likely be back out on the streets before long. He is today's recidivist report. Our armed citizen story from Alabama, Madison County. Now, the headline doesn't tell the story. No charges filed in deadly shooting in Madison County. That's not a lot of detail, right? Here are the details. 31-year-old Jonathan Marquis Burrell was killed by a woman who was defending herself in a domestic violence assault on Sunday night. Sheriff's deputies called just before midnight to the scene, found Burrell dead. Brent Patterson, a sheriff's office spokesman, said that Burrell's former fiance called 911 to report that he had shown up at her home and attacked her. When deputies got to the scene, the woman had fatally shot Burrell. Criminal charges not being filed against the woman who was questioned at the sheriff's investigative headquarters. Sheriff's office says that Burrell was known to law enforcement because of a history of domestic violence and violating protection from abuse orders. In fact, earlier this year, Burrell pleaded guilty to violating a domestic violence protection order. He was sentenced to, you ready? 2 years of probation. Released from the Madison County Jail on February 13th to begin serving probation. That protection order was issued in 2018 when the woman reported that Burrell had threatened, injured, stalked, and stolen from her. And again, Mr. Burrell apparently couldn't stay away. Thankfully, this woman was able to protect herself. She is alive today because she was able to protect and defend herself. And finally, our good deed of the day from Hampton, Virginia, where a restaurant owner bringing some free meals to healthcare workers. You might want to pull the mask just up, just over the, because, if you're wearing the mask and you kind of cover the nose and the mouth. If you're wearing the mask, if you're not wearing the mask, I guess you don't have to cover anything. But if you're wearing the mask, don't do it halfway. Anyway, I don't want to bust the guy's chops. He's doing a good thing. Jeremy Brown is the owner of the Sunsplash Caribbean restaurant, and times are tough for Jeremy and a lot of other restaurant owners, but he is still doing what he can to help out. By the end of this week, he plans on donating 1,500 meals to frontline healthcare workers in the Hampton Roads area. He says that he got the idea after talking with his local pastor, Guillermo Hunt, who said this is such an important time. It's a time that each of us can exemplify character, exemplify brotherhood, exemplify doing good to be a good Samaritan. This is the time to reach out, and that's exactly what Jeremy Brown is doing. He says he's had to cut hours at his own restaurant. He says he hopes to get back to normal very soon. He says it's really, really hard right now, but even in these hard times, Jeremy Brown, again, stepping up and helping out those who are are serving on the front lines of our healthcare industry. So in the right place at the right time and willing and able to do the right thing. Jeremy Brown, we thank you, sir, for your good deed. I got to tell you, Hampton Roads is about 3.5 hours from Farmville, Virginia. But I'm awfully tempted to drive down this weekend and try to pick up some takeout from the restaurant there. All right, that is about all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. Thank you for being a part of today's show. Make sure that you are keeping up with all of the latest Second Amendment news and information by checking out BearingArms.com each and every day. You can also subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube or the Bearing Arms Cam & Company podcast on the Apple Podcast. And that way you never miss one of these programs. Also, don't forget, you become a VIP member of Bearing Arms and a VIP Gold member of Town Hall Media. You get exclusive analysis, commentary, live chats, and more. We're going to be doing another live chat here before long, and I'd love to see you take part in that as well. As always, thanks for watching, listening, for spreading the word about Bearing Arms Cam & Company. Until we talk again, be safe, be well, be free, and we'll see you here soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company tomorrow.